Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Speakin' Steagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I am Nick Vete. I am joined by my partner, Ricardo Martinez Paz. Man, training camps are upon us. What a joyous time to be a football fan. And obviously, we're covering both the Steelers and the Eagles here. And yeah, there's a lot going on. You know what I love about training camp so much is just all the little storylines you always get, and like the little slightest updates where you're like, huh, or just make you think a little bit. But it's an exciting time, and we're also, of course, going to be going over our running back expectations and breakdown a little later in the episode. So I hope you're all having a good day whenever you're tuning into this, and thank you for joining us. Ricardo, how you doing today, bro?
Good man on this fine Friday morning. Yeah, feeling good. Ready to talk about training camp. Finally, yeah, as you said, finally getting to that time of the year where things get exciting and start picking up again. So
Finally get exciting. Dude, you know what's so bizarre? I like went through a random update on my laptop last night, and like all of a sudden, everything I was logged into just like completely logged me out. So I was like logged out of this. I was logged out of like my Google Docs. I was logged out of the Athletic this morning. I tried to go and read a story this morning, and like I just realized like, oh, I must have like put my name in wrong, but whatever.
wow,
It's one of those weird things. But
yeah,
my laptop's shot anyway, so I'm getting a new one of those. Because this thing is on its last legs here. So I don't know. Hopefully, moving up in the world, we're switching over to Mac finally. So
hey, let's go.
I'm gonna finally get on the Mac train. It's about time. So
Yeah.
I'm making the switch. But that's not what the people are tuned in to listen to. We got training camp stuff to talk about. So there's a lot of updates that like I want to run through with you.
Oh yeah.
Let's start with the Steelers because there's a couple things that are pressing on my mind that I want to get your opinion on. I want to get out there. So the first one is this Diontae Johnson situation, which we obviously have been talking about it a lot. I've been talking about it a lot, and last week we did our wide receivers expectation and breakdown, and I was saying that I don't really see him doing like a holdout type situation, but now we're at the point where he hasn't done any team drills. He's only done individual workouts. Yesterday, he was seen sprinting on the sidelines with Minka Fitzpatrick, who's got the slight wrist injury right now after falling off of his bike, which still kind of makes me chuckle a little bit. But I was thinking too, like, how many Mai Tais deep do you think Minka Fitzpatrick was on vacation when he fell off his bike, dude? Like, come on now. But I mean, hey, I wouldn't be making jokes about it if the Steelers said it was some serious injury.
Right.
It seems like he's gonna be all right, and we know the professional. Yeah. But anyway, back to Diontae Johnson. So like it does look like he's gonna hold in at this point. And now we get the news yesterday that DK Metcalf signed to this 3-year, $72 million extension, giving him $24 million a year, which again we're seeing wide receivers really get paid this offseason. The market is really beneficial towards them getting paid, some solid salaries. And now it's at the point where if I'm Diontae Johnson and I look at DK Metcalf's stats from last year, this was DK Metcalf, 17 games, 75 receptions, 967 yards, and 12 TDs. Diontae Johnson, one less game, 16. He had 107 receptions, over 1,100 yards, and 8 TDs. So the only stat that DK Metcalf led in of those four was games played and touchdowns. And Diontae and DK Metcalf got $24 million a season. So you know what? It's at the point where, yeah, it sucks, but I get it if Diontae Johnson wants to hold in. I mean, what are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I mean, just going back to DK Metcalf's stats, I guess he had Russell Wilson at like the first part of the season, then got injured. So then it was Geno Smith. So, that might have been part of it as to why he had sort of a down year. But in terms of, I wouldn't be like, yeah, he's at practice and all or training camp, but him being on the sideline and stuff, I thought that was interesting. At least he's going, not pulling like, what other players do, just hold out and don't show up at all. But like at this point, if I'm Diontae Johnson, I'm just like, yeah, when's my time coming? When are you going to pay me? And so we were talking about this last week, it's that question now, the Steelers, do you pay him now and like probably pay him a few $1 million less? And then if like he plays really well this season and then, you have to pay him more money next offseason, So it's really interesting, this situation now that DK Metcalf has gotten like a massive extension as well. But I sort of agree with you still on how we talked about last week. He's in that 23 million dollar like range, which at this point I feel like that's what they have to pay him right now at this moment in time. Whereas saying next offseason it's going to be a couple $1 million more.
My biggest concern too, though, is like, then if we pay him, like I talked about this last week, if we pay him, if the Steelers pay him, and then Chase Claypool reaches his full potential and has an outstanding year, I mean, there's no way that the Steelers organization is going to want to keep both of those guys on long-term extension.
Right.
And then you're going to run into the same issue with Claypool next year. So, I mean, like you said, it is interesting because he is on the sidelines right now, which is similar to what TJ Watt did all of last offseason, where he was at practices and at training camp, but obviously wasn't participating in any of the team drills or anything like that until he got paid. And, like, it's not a big deal to me because Diontae Johnson's a professional. Like, he's going to get caught up to speed. Like, he's obviously in shape. He's not going to play in the preseason one way or the other.
Yeah.
So, like, it's not really a big – especially if he's not paid. There's no shot that he's playing. And even if he is paid, I don't know if they're going to send him out there. So, it's one of those things where I was saying, like, the best-case scenario was, like, let him hold in, or I guess the best case scenario was that he didn't hold in. But now at this point, I mean, I think it's definitely a timid situation, and it's going to be really important for the Steelers, and especially Mike Tomlin, who's kind of been giving half-hearted answers on the situation, to really get a read and get a pulse on what Diontae Johnson's thinking here. If this is actually something that's going to translate into the season, or if this is just kind of him making a statement and just preserving himself until we get closer to the regular season.
Right.
I don't know if there's much more to add on at this point, but it's definitely something that I think everyone's going to be keeping their eye on as to what's kind of the progression week to week into training camp of how this kind of goes until we lead up to the preseason. But yeah, I mean, I honestly can't argue. He deserves his money. I mean, the stats show it. But I understand from the Steelers' perspective why they're a little hesitant, given what else they currently have in the wide receiver room, what Chase Claypool could become, and just how outrageous the market is right now for wide receivers. The other really big update that I wanted to give on Steelers training camp specifically was just kind of the quarterback battle. I guess we'll kind of update this like as we go out, but nothing really crazy. Mark Caballi, who writes for The Athletic of the Steelers, he was reporting that Mason Rudolph actually looked the best of the three day one of training camp, which, isn't really what you want to hear. But the indications were that Mitch Trubisky was the better of the three in day two. Again, it's early, and I'm just going to echo, like, at this point, like what Mike Tomlin said in his one of his press conferences. He was like, everybody in the media wants us to look at this like a sprint for the QB battle, but we're evaluating it as a marathon throughout training camp and into the preseason. So there's no need to kind of rush along, and it's only day two. So I'm not going to, there's no reason to really jump to any quick analysis or anything like that. There's nothing super noteworthy of it. And I mean, it's one of those things. You're 2 days in, and the pads haven't even been put on yet. So there's nothing really to make of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, still too early to determine anything at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. At this point, it's really just getting acclimated and wide receivers and quarterbacks kind of getting used to each other even more than they already did in the spring. So that's pretty much the main updates I had. I know there's a few with the Eagles that I wanted to get your opinion on too, but I'm curious if there's anything that jumps off the page at you that you've heard from Eagles camp the first 2 days that you kind of wanted to bring up first and foremost.
Well, I read something from Bleeding Green Nation. I think it was the first day, so 2 days ago, of training camp. And I mean, it basically was just like a summary of how Jalen Hurts did on this first day. And it was basically up and down, sort of how he started last year, in his first training camp last year. So to me, that's just like, it's 1 day, so it's fine. It's like up and down. That's sort of to be expected early on, sort of getting back into things. So I'm not concerned at all about that. Not yet, at least. If it's like up and down, it's inconsistent, like going forward for the next, couple of weeks, then I'm gonna be like, okay, maybe a little hesitant there, but
it's gonna get a little more questionable.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like a part of it too is the fact that like Nick Sirianni has like these very like I don't want to call him like laid back, but like the way that he designs his training camp and his practices are like very oriented on like non-contact. and like avoiding injuries at all costs. So I'm just curious, like from your perspective, do you like that? Do you like the fact? I mean, obviously it's good he's trying to prevent injuries, but do you think it's beneficial? Because I know they practiced for the first day on Wednesday, or maybe it was Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever their first day of camp was,
Yeah,
and then the
yeah.
following day they didn't practice. They just had a walkthrough with no real drills or anything like that. So I'm just curious what your perspective on all of it is, because to me, it'd be kind of like a little bit of a mixed bag. But I'm curious what you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of mixed because his training camp was like, all right, pads, eventually started like coming on again, and it's just like you got full practice, everyone's just going like full steam ahead. That's sort of how I envision like training camp is like, yeah, you had OTAs back early on in the spring or whatever, and that was more of just like chill, not as intense as training camp because now you're getting to the point where it's like, all right, well, you gotta develop chemistry with players, you gotta develop like your skills, and get back into game shape essentially. So in that regard, I kind of understand why like the contrast of it, and as opposed to like Sirianni being a bit more laid back with his practice. I mean, he's kind of been like that. He's just that's kind of the person that he is. That's his personality, like laid back, fun. I mean, yeah, he's serious when it comes to like like down to business. That's he'll go full steam ahead. But I can sort of understand where him and like the organization is coming from in terms of having like walkthroughs, like you said, the day after really intense practice. I mean, I guess I mean, I don't know the science behind it or like if it actually does help, but if it does, like if it is beneficial long term, then
It
I'm not gonna like disagree.
if it ultimately prevents injuries at this point when you don't even have the pads on, then yeah, I guess it's beneficial. But I think you bring up a good point where it's like when you get to training camp, it's like, all right, we're a couple days away from August here. We're going to be coming up on preseason games before we even know it. I mean, it's like you want to get these guys ramped up. You want to start evaluating your talent, especially some of these guys. If I was a young player who's competing for a roster spot, like an undrafted free agent or a guy who's maybe been around in the league for 2 to 3 years, I would hate being on a team like the Eagles where I can't show off a day in
Yeah,
and day out what I have to offer. I mean, that's got to be a frustrating feeling. I'm sure for guys who are established, well, AJ Brown's maybe not a good example because he's got to get acclimated with everything. But if you're a guy like if you're an experienced veteran like Fletcher Cox, I'm sure you love the fact that you don't have to go out there and
yeah,
ramp things up every day. I mean, you know what you got to do to get prepared, but I think there's definitely the benefits and drawbacks of it. Of course, if it's going
yeah.
to keep players injured until you get into like the thick of things in August and you really start ramping up with pads and everything, then I guess it's beneficial. But I like the point that you made where it's like you want these guys to be ready for the preseason, especially when we see so many stars not play in the preseason. Like you don't want weeks 1 and 2 to be preseason games for them
Yeah.
where they're not fully in game shape, they're not fully ramped up, and you're losing games that are super meaningful to how your team actually to how things actually go in real games.
Right, right. Yeah, I agree with that aspect too. I mean, like if I mean, we won't really like be able to tell now if it's beneficial long term. I guess we gotta wait for that. But injuries are just a thing that happen in football. They're kind of inevitable, and it's like sometimes even with these kinds of like precautions and like a bit more laid back practices and walkthroughs, they just still happen. It's like
Yeah, I
you
mean
can't really
you
control
could
it.
point to Tampa Bay and Ryan Jensen. He just
Exactly.
went
Yeah.
down with the knee injury. I mean, again, it's like it was during a practice and everything, but it's one of those things where I feel like in football it doesn't, especially with ACL injuries that can be so devastating. You don't need contact for those to happen, and it's like,
Exactly.
okay, if Nick Sirianni can limit those by having walkthroughs, every third day or however he constructs it, rather than a non-contact practice, so be it. And if it keeps you from having a season-ending injury to a key player, then I guess that is beneficial. But if we still see the rash of injuries come because these guys aren't ramped up and they're not ready to go come preseason, then I don't know. Maybe it's also an issue. So it's definitely a back and forth, and there's definitely benefits and
Yeah.
drawbacks to it.
Definitely.
A couple other things I want to get your opinion on. I mean, this isn't really big, but the Isaac Semualu, Nick
Right.
Sirianni and everybody said, he's probably going to be he's probably going to get the first shot at the guard at the other open guard position.
Right.
The other thing I thought was interesting, and we talked about this a lot with the safeties, was in the preseason, in the pre-training camp press conference, Sirianni and Howie Roseman both echoed that they have a lot of faith in Marcus Epps. So
Right.
I think we're definitely going to see a huge role for him. And I think that's definitely the most beneficial. And then you kind of have Jaquiski Tart in that third safety role. That would be the
Yeah.
ideal scenario.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess that's another thing. It's just kind of a wait and see how he does as we go through training camp, right?
Right. I mean, the other thing is Kayvon Wallace, former fourth rounder, hasn't, or at least the the first practice he didn't do very well according to Bleeding Green Nation again. He was struggling a lot, and he like what's his name, Brandon Lee Goutman, I think is the one who wrote it. He even went as far as said like I wouldn't be surprised if he got cut. I was like, okay, well then we only have
Oh,
three
boy.
safeties. Like that's not a good
That's
sign.
brutal.
Yeah,
That's brutal.
that's not good at all.
It's
So
not good. I mean, oh man, yeah, that's rough. I mean, again, it's early. They don't even have the pads on yet, but like
yeah,
to be struggling that much in non-contact practice already is
that's not a good
you
sign.
can't jump to conclusions. You never know if you can turn around, but yeah, not what you like to hear. And I mean,
Yeah,
I guess the only other thing to note too is that what was it? Brandon Graham is I guess fully healthy and he's fully ready to go, which is a good sign. I'm really curious. That's another storyline for the Eagles. I'm really curious how they deploy all these edge rushers that they have on their roster.
yeah.
Because I mean, we've talked about this in depth, but I'm a big Josh Sweat fan, and obviously you've still got Derek Barnett there, Brandon Graham coming back, and you brought in Hassan Reddick, who's best when he's rushing the quarterback. So it's going to be interesting to see how Gannon kind of deploys them all and splits up their reps. But that's just another thing I'm going to kind of keep my eye on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So one other thing before we get into the running backs here is Big Ben has kind of been in the news. Ben Roethlisberger
Yes.
commenting on a ton of stuff. He sat down with Ron Cook, who I believe he writes for one of the newspapers in Pittsburgh, but he's also got a radio show on 93.7 The Fan, which is the radio station out there in Pittsburgh. And they sat down for an exclusive interview. And Ben Roethlisberger's really been kind of making noise, and this was kind of the pinnacle of it. And some of the things he said, I wrote them down here in this interview, which was really intriguing. But one of the things he kind of went back and forth on with Cameron Hayward is he was saying that players nowadays are being me first guys rather than team first guys. And he said that Kevin Colbert didn't really want him back last season, that he felt like Mike Tomlin was kind of okay with it going either way, and that it was really Art Rooney, the owner, who wanted him back. So really just kind of stirring the pot for no reason at this point. And he also brought up some stuff about Rashad Mendenhall from that Super Bowl against the Packers. So really kind of brought up a lot of questions. And to me, it just sounds like a guy who still wants to be relevant, who's going through his first training camp of not being a football player anymore and just wants to still kind of be in the news and just be relevant. That was kind of how I took it. I'm not sure how you took it all.
I mean, yeah, I was like, yeah, like you said, yeah, stir up the pot definitely. I don't remember. I can't remember who it was or where I read it from. It was like Roethlisberger wasn't exactly thrilled to retire or something like that. Like he wasn't like super, like he wasn't pro retire. Like yeah, I'm done. Like like that sort of thing.
Well, that was exactly the other way I took it. Was like this just seems like a guy who like maybe wasn't fully ready to retire and thought that he still had more left in the league. But it's like when you look at his numbers last year, even aside from looking at the numbers, when you just look at what he did on the football field, where his arm strength was at, where his just talent was at. I mean, frankly, it was kind of like Drew Brees. It got to a certain point where he's just not capable of being a quality starting quarterback anymore. And I'm sorry, Ben, but when you don't take care of your body and keep yourself in peak physical fitness, the way that Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady have throughout the years, like you can't expect the longevity that those guys have had in the NFL. And I think that the Steelers kind of realize the writing's on the wall, and we need to move on, and we need to start preparing for the future. So I'm kind of with you there. But yeah, I just thought, what'd you think of all this Cameron Hayward back and forth stuff? Because I know Cameron Hayward kind of came to the defense of his players a little bit and came to the defense of today's NFL guys.
I mean, listen, Cam Hayward's an absolute monster, so I'm not sure why you're like, and you played with them for like so many years. I don't know why you're throwing like some shade at him. Like, I don't know how I feel about like Roethlisberger saying that kind of stuff about teammate played with. So it's like for me, I'm just like, I mean, Cam Hayward, who knows? Like he's probably doesn't really give much to it. I mean, he's still in the league. He's still playing at a really high level. So, I mean, and Roethlisberger's not. So it's like,
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think that the comments were directed at Cam Hayward. You know who my initial thought, you know who I thought this was directed at initially?
who?
Antonio Brown was what I really thought.
Ah,
Like these, do you see that at all? Because
yeah,
it's like
yeah,
that's. I mean, Antonio Brown's the pinnacle of that, and I
yeah,
mean, like I know him and Ben were together for a long time, but I mean, like I don't know. That's what, like the initial vibes of it. I was like, this feels to me like he's trying to like send a little shot at Antonio Brown a little bit, just kind of the way he carried himself, and especially even like after he left Pittsburgh, all the drama with the Raiders, and then
yeah.
walking off the field with the Buccaneers, the entire mess that it turned into. I mean, that's really what it felt like to me was kind of like the direction, and I felt like it was more geared towards some of the diva wide receivers that Ben has played with throughout his career. And I mean, like I like Cameron Hayward coming to the defense of his guys, and now he's like the captain of the Steelers and everything. So
Yeah.
like that's a role that I really like him kind of being like, hey, like like and it seems like him and Ben aren't gonna have any problems, and they played together for so long. But frankly, I mean, at the end of the day, Cam Hayward's the one who's still playing at a high level on the football field, like you said. And he's got to be the leader of this team. He's got to stick up for his guys. So I like that. But I mean, just felt like it was just really unnecessary comments by Ben
Yeah.
overall
Yeah.
to just try and stay relevant at this point.
Yeah, yeah, it's just kind of silly comments, but yeah, it's like, yeah, if you
Like,
wanted
it's
to
not
stir up the
needed.
pot, you did, like kind of. So
Yeah, I didn't think the pot needed to be stirred there, but I mean, hey, if you're Ron Cook and that's the kind of stuff you're getting, good for you that you're getting
yeah,
that
exactly.
those answers out of Big Ben because he's giving you some juicy stuff.
Yeah,
So I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna hear from Ben anymore as the season continues to go
I feel
on.
like we will, but
You think
that's
we
just
will? Yeah. I mean, like
we might, we might.
he brought up some stuff too about like back when they renamed Acrisure Stadium, which like isn't big. Like nobody liked
Right.
the name change or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, like I could definitely see him making some noise as we continue down here. I don't know. Definitely interesting. Maybe he'll learn his lesson. We'll see. But I think it is time to get into dun, 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 our position breakdowns and expectations. We are on to the running backs. We got the Steelers with special teams linebackers and safety, Eagles with defensive line corners, offensive linemen, and the wide receiver tight ends. So today we have the running backs. Why can I never remember who went first from week to week?
I think you're up because I think I went. Last.
I'm up with running backs. All right.
Yeah,
I
you're
can
right.
never remember this. I don't know for what reason. My mind just like can't process it. I literally every week I've had to ask you who's going first this week. But
Don't worry, I got you.
yeah, Ricardo's got it. He's got this on lock. All right. So honestly, there's been so much like to go over recently with both the Steelers and Eagles because they've kind of been in the news with their running back situations. So I mean, the Steelers first. Obviously, everything kind of starts with Najee, runs through Najee, and ends with Najee. Great rookie year last year. Played exceptionally well. Played in all 17 games. Led the league in touches with 381 and was second in the league in rushing yards with 307, only behind Jonathan Taylor. So an outstanding rookie year. 1,200 rushing yards, which was fourth in the NFL, and he had 7 rushing TDs. So the biggest question mark, or not really question mark, but the biggest thing with him that the Steelers are going to kind of try to adjust is to find a way to cut down on his touches this season, find a way to take the ball out of his hands a little bit, not because of a lack of talent, but just purely because they want to be able to preserve him. I mean, we've seen running backs in the past just be overutilized and wear down really quickly in their career. Ezekiel Elliott is the first one that comes to mind with me, who's not nearly the same player he was in his first year, 2 years when he was getting the ball 350 plus times in his first 2 seasons. And, Najee Harris jokingly said on a podcast, I don't remember where he had the interview, jokingly said, I'd be fine with 500 touches for winning the game, which, I mean, that's fine. But, if the Steelers don't want to wear this guy out like they have some of their running backs in the past, now we've seen running backs around the NFL get worn down, they have to find a true second running back. And the fact that they kind of have a lack of a second running back is concerning. They have Benny Snell. They have Anthony McFarland. They just brought in Jeremy McNichols, who was a signing that isn't really much to talk about.
Yeah.
But, I mean, when you look around the league, all the good teams have a second running back that they can kind of turn to and either hand the ball off or just give more touches to. And the Steelers don't really have that. They didn't have it last year. And running back coach Eddie Faulkner has said, like, yeah, we have to find a way to get touches into other running backs' hands. So it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of go about that. Benny Snell he's the incumbent to be kind of the second running back, but he only had 36 rushes last year, which was the least of his career, down from, I believe he had over 100 the previous 2 years. Anthony McFarland only had 4 touches on the whole season. He was out for a period of time due to COVID, but really he was just sitting fourth on the depth chart. And I'm not getting my hopes up for Jeremy McNichols. So, I mean, I don't know where they expect this big. I don't know who they're expecting to really turn to in this situation to be like, hey, this is the guy that's going to kind of spare Najee Harris a bit.
Right. So do you think there's any chance that the Steelers bring in another running back in like free agency or something like that? You know, one of the free agents.
I think it's feasible. I think you never know when you see a training camp cut come once we get to kind of that point of the season, where maybe a veteran gets cut to save some cap space or something like that who could potentially come in. I always think back to the Le'Veon Bell days when they had D'Angelo Williams there, who was just a perfect complement to him, and you were able to hand the ball off to D'Angelo Williams, 10 times a game in certain situations, and just spare Le'Veon Bell and keep him off the field. And that was a real concentrated effort the Steelers tried to do. Ultimately, Le'Veon Bell still got worn down a little bit, but if you could find a guy like that, maybe it's Benny Snell. The problem with Benny Snell is he's never had success when you give him sporadic touches of 5 to 10 touches a game. He's a guy that needs double-digit touches to really be effective as a runner, and he's just not going to get that with Najee Harris. And the Steelers have said, yes, we want to cut down on Najee Harris's workload, but the thing that's really concerning to me is they want to cut down on his workload, but they also want to be a run-first team. So,
Right.
Yes, I would love to see them go and try to find another running back. And they brought in Jeremy McNichols. And I was looking back on it because I was trying to remember when Derrick Henry got hurt, how much he was used. But, everybody was kind of saying, expect Jeremy McNichols to get a lot of rushes. And that just wasn't the case. It turned out to be Deontay Foreman who got the majority of the rushes. And so, I'm not expecting much out of Jeremy McNichols. So it is concerning. I would like to see them bring in another veteran running back. And they toyed around with David Johnson, who I thought could have been a fit. But, I definitely want to see them try to bring in another running back if the right veteran is available.
Do you think McNichols is going to make the team? Ultimately? No.
I don't think he's going to make the team. Hey, if he surprises people, fine. But there's a lot of young guys that they have deep down that they kind of signed, undrafted free agents, guys that they brought in on one-year deals, veteran minimums to kind of see what happens. And also, the player that I have the highest expectations for, I think Benny Snell's still going to make the roster. And unless they bring in someone else, he's going to be the one they turn to the most on running plays to kind of spare Najee Harris. I think the best way that they can get the ball out of Najee Harris's hand is to utilize Anthony McFarland more. Because this is a guy who's got speed. He's got the explosive big play ability. And now with Matt Canada in his second season as offensive coordinator, Ben Roethlisberger no longer there. We know that he kind of likes to run more of a college-style offense. So I think if we could see him kind of hand the ball off to Anthony McFarland, use him in jet sweeps, use him in different motions, use him out of the backfield in passing games, that's the way that you can really limit Najee Harris, get him off the field. So I'd like to see Anthony McFarland take a step in preseason and training camp and really be utilized more throughout the season. I think that's the best way that they can kind of go about getting the ball out of Najee Harris's hand. And I'm excited because he is a big play guy. And, I don't know what the reason is. He only got 4 touches last year specifically, and this is kind of going to be the make or break year for him. But, yeah, I don't see McNichols making the roster. And Anthony McFarland is the guy that I'm really hopeful has the best training camp and has the best preseason.
So in terms of stats for Najee Harris, what do you expect for him this year?
It's tough because it's like, how do you go from 307 carries, which was second in the NFL? How do you limit that but still put up the yardage?
Yeah.
And when I say what's more important, I think it is limiting the carries. I don't want to see this guy's wheels fall off the wagon by the time he's in his 3rd or 4th year in the NFL.
Right.
And to lose him for an extended period of time with the injury without a true second running back, if that were the case where he's hurt for any extended amount of time, I would have faith in Benny Snell because he has been shown to be effective when he gets the ball when he gets a large amount of rushes. But if we could somehow get his rushes down to 280 carries, and we're seeing him with a total touches down from 380 to maybe somewhere in the 320, 330 range. He had the same amount of receptions last year as T. Higgins. which blew my mind. Like
Wow.
that's got to be part of where you have to cut down
Right.
on his usage because he's just gonna get worn down that way. So I want to see his touches down. I want to see his rushes down. I don't know if the rushes is really something you limit so much as using him in the passing game. I think that's where Anthony McFarland can be really effective.
Yeah.
And I still want to see him try to get over 1,000 yards, which I think even with the reduced touches, 1,000 yards is still feasible. And
Yeah.
maybe some more touchdowns. That's how you balance it. He had seven in his rookie year. Maybe get up around to anywhere from like 8 to 10, and I'd be happy with it. And he's going to be a workhorse. He's going to be a bell cow, and I fully expect him to be up there when it comes to the rushes, even though the Steelers are going to try to limit him. But yeah, I want to see McFarland utilized more in Canada's offense, and I want to see Benny Snell get more touches. He had, I don't know if I just got lost or if Ricardo got lost here from this stream. That's unfortunate. Let's see here. Let's see if we can add him back. All right, not sure what happened here, if that was my issue or anything, but you hear me, Ricardo? We all good? You got me, bro?
What?
You hear me?
Yeah.
All right, we're good. I don't know what happened there, but you got me now. But anyway, yeah, I was just wrapping up on Harris, and I don't want to keep beating the drum here, but, Benny Snell had 36 rushes last year. If he can get back up to around 80 to 100, I think that's another way that you kind of limit Najee Harris's workload. So if Snell takes off some of the pressure running the ball and McFarland takes off some of the pressure out of the backfield, I think that's how you limit it. But hey, I'm open to bringing in another veteran running back who could potentially spare him as well, similar to the D'Angelo Williams, Le'Veon Bell dynamic a couple of years ago.
Right. Yeah, I feel like that would make sense. But
so yeah, that's all I really have to add. But I have high hopes for Najee. I just want to see him not get hurt and not see him, overly. I don't want to see him you just don't want to see him get worn down at the end of the day. But we can move on to the Eagles running back now, and obviously got a couple of talented guys in that room. So I don't know if you want to talk us through Miles Sanders first or what direction you want to go here first, but take it away.
Right. So the way I sort of see it, generally speaking, is more of a committee because, for one, Miles Sanders just can't stay healthy for a whole season. So that's been his biggest issue. And sometimes he's just inconsistent as a runner. Like sometimes he won't wait. Like his patience sometimes is not the best. So he won't find the right hole to run through. And then the other thing with Miles Sanders is that he just has issues with drops. So that's, again, not the most encouraging, which is why we'd have like Kenneth Gainwell, former fifth rounder from a year ago, sort of take those snaps on third down or something like that. But I just think overall it's going to be more of a sort of a committee. That's sort of how Sirianni would stick with it. But the interesting thing is too that all four of the running backs are returning basically. So it's Miles Sanders, Kenneth Gainwell, Boston Scott. I mean, he always just kills the Giants for some reason. And who is it? Jason Huntley, who is back for another year. So my biggest issue though with this team is that they're all they're not undersized necessarily. They're just not like big backs, like Derrick Henry kind. They're not like physical runners.
For someone who can go and get a 3rd and 1 or a 3rd and 2.
Yeah, run like straight through the tackles, up the field, downhill runner kind of player. Every one of our running backs is sort of, they're very, very athletic. It's just, power is something that they don't exactly have.
They're not power backs. I mean,
yeah,
I was actually looking into this. So because they brought in what was his name? Jaquan Hardy for a potential workout and to see if they would maybe sign him. I don't even know if that really makes any headlines if they bring him in. He's probably, I don't even know if he would make the roster at that point, but they ultimately didn't sign him. But and I wonder if part of the reason they didn't bring him in is maybe they are looking for more of that power back. And Jaquan Hardy's only 5'10", 212 pounds. So he's smaller than Miles Sanders.
Yeah.
So it's not like you really would have a fit. And Jordan Howard, who was obviously on the roster last year, he was 6 foot, 225. So really only basically 1 inch bigger than Miles Sanders and 10 pounds heavier than Miles Sanders. So do you want them to bring in I know you want them to bring in a power back, but I mean, did they really even have that last year? I mean, I guess we could classify Jordan Howard as that, but I always felt he was just more of a one-cut back who could maybe, power up for a couple yards.
Right. So I just feel like to change things up, I feel like they do need one. It's just because, like, I'm fine. Well, I'm not necessarily fine, but it'd be like it's whatever. It's okay if like the Eagles go in with the first three running backs I mentioned, Sanders, Gainwell, and Boston Scott. That's fine and all. It's just I sort of how I envision a running back is like, especially one that runs downhill, a power back. Just like
Sure.
you want to make defenses sort of like crowd out the box, load the box up, and like kind of almost give them something to worry about, because like Miles Sanders, yeah, he can like go off for like really long touchdown runs. He does that every now and then.
You're looking for someone who can stick their nose into the line of scrimmage, pick up that first down. All these guys are home run hitters, basically.
Basically, yeah. So that's like, well, it's like fine every now and then like for them to go off or whatever. Like, yeah, but it's just like we don't have that one like player that's it's like like defenses don't want to tackle, basically. Just like
that's a good way to put it. Who's going to wear down a defense too?
Exactly.
Are you concerned at all about the fact that Miles Sanders didn't have a single touchdown? I mean, it was made up for by Gainwell and Scott. Gainwell had 5 and Scott had 7 last year. But I mean, Sanders had none. I'm just curious, like, what your expectations are for him. This is also the last year of his contract, so
yes,
I don't know how that plays into it as well. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, that was interesting. I mean, yeah, sure, like you said, it was made up for by Gainwell and Scott, but he's like he can be like Miles Sanders can be a pretty like I want to say I can say like top like half of the league if he's like healthy and finds a way to be more consistent as a runner and as a pass catcher as well. Like he could be a 3-down back. It's just for some reason he hasn't exactly reached that potential. I don't know if he will. And like you said, it's a contract year, so it's like they like he has to perform. I think like this is me personally, but if the Eagles, if Miles Sanders doesn't go for like 1,500 yards or something like scrimmage yards, I don't think the Eagles are re-signing him. Like that's just how I see it. And if obviously the touchdowns got to go up, obviously from 0. I think at least 5 is reasonable for him, and I think he should achieve that. But it's just the thing with, which is why I go back to sort of like this running back by committee. It's like if it is sort of a committee, it's kind of a bit more unrealistic for Miles Sanders to get 1,500 scrimmage yards total, because you're spreading out.
I think that's okay though, because I think you can get production from Miles Sanders, and I kind of agree with you. I don't think it's pressing that the Eagles need to re-sign this guy.
Yeah,
their money could probably be better well spent somewhere else, and you could find a cheaper replacement for him on the open market next offseason if you want to continue doing the running back by committee, which seemed to work all right. I mean, the fact that you've also got Jalen Hurts there, who's a mobile quarterback, I think helps the running backs out, because when it opens up the play action, and then you can get guys open in space and everything like that. You can get going with the run pass options, and I think it leads to some good opportunities for these guys. One other note I found interesting on Miles Sanders was the fact that last year he was tied for second in yards per attempt at 5.5. So I mean, like, when he's getting the opportunities and he's running the ball and he's staying healthy, like, he's effective in picking up yards. But I mean, it's just concerning because he can't stay on the field and he hasn't been able. I mean, now that they are going to this running back committee, the fact that Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell are finding success, it kind of leaves him in a weird spot where kind of, unless he has an incredibly, great season, like you said, 1,500 scrimmage yards is pretty impressive, which, like you talked about his deficiencies as a pass catcher too. That's going to be a tough goal for him to get. But I'm curious, what are you looking for from Kenneth Gainwell? Because he looked really good last year. Do you want to see his workload up the lot? And, what do you see his role becoming this year?
Yeah, so here's where it's like interesting, because like I said, 1,500 for Miles Sanders is what I want him to get, but with Kenneth Gainwell, I kind of don't expect him to reach that at the same time. So I expect Gainwell to get more touches. I mean, he's good as a pass catcher, better than Miles Sanders, and like I mean, he's definitely growing as a runner. He had his moments where he had some really good runs and stuff like that. But I definitely overall expect him to get more touches. Miles Sanders, I mean, if he goes down, I think I would trust Kenneth Gainwell to, take over those touches alongside, Boston Scott. But yeah, it's honestly,
They've got solid depth here for the committee. They've got solid depth.
If Miles Sanders go down, so be it. But if at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if Kenneth Gainwell next season takes over as our running back number one for the Eagles. That's just how I see it. I just think he has more potential at the moment than Miles Sanders does in his 4 years in the league, or 3 or 4 years in the league so far. So it's definitely going to be interesting.
It's fair. And I mean, I think if you can see Gainwell progress to the point where it's like, hey, this guy can handle, at least half of the touches that we give our running backs, you could potentially let Miles Sanders walk at the end of the year if he's disappointing, and then go out and get a power back to just be a true complement to Gainwell. And if you kind of have a 1-2 punch of Gainwell and somebody who is a power back on the open market that can kind of go off of one another, then yeah, you could potentially look at letting Sanders walk if he doesn't really have a place anymore on this team, and you're going to have to pay him another contract.
Yeah, that's where I'm a bit skeptical about Miles Sanders after the season. That's where I'm just I don't know if he can prove to the Eagles that he belongs there, that he's a true number one back. So that's
so what are your expectations for him statistically for Miles Sanders this year? And I mean, again, I guess it's up to Howie Roseman and the Eagles. What is enough for them to re-sign him? But what are you expecting from him this year?
For Miles Sanders, I would say at least 1,000 scrimmage yards, at the very minimum.
Last year he had 750 rush yards, so
right.
I don't have his total scrimmage yards.
Yeah, but so if he's around or rush yard, I don't know. I guess 1,000, 1,100.
I mean, still he's got to get up. I mean, yeah. I mean, I would say 900 to 1,000 rushing yards. You got to stay healthy. I feel like that's a big.
That's the thing too. Yeah,
he only played 12 games last year.
Exactly. So that's just been his issue, being in the league since he's been in the league, just injuries, and it hasn't been on the field healthy. So if he can play through the full 16, I'm sure, or 17 games, I'm sure he could reach that goal, honestly. But
yeah, and you want to see him get in the end zone more.
Oh yeah, absolutely. At least 5 touchdowns, at least.
Right.
That seems realistic to me. I don't know.
I think that's realistic. I mean, he had 137 rushes last year. Again, I don't know how they're going to split it up amongst the three, but I'm thinking if he gets to that 16-17 game, he could definitely get over 200. And I don't know if that's enough for him to get to 1,000 yards and reach the touchdown totals he needs. But, I mean, I think given the weapons that the Eagles have on the outside at wide receiver, that's also going to open up the box a little bit for these talented running backs to run behind arguably the best offensive line in all of football. So the excuses are kind of over for Miles Sanders at this point. It's time for him to step up or step out of here.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fair enough. I don't know if I really have anything else pressing that I want to ask you. I mean, I think it is going to be kind of interesting to see if they do. I guess both these teams could potentially look at adding another running back, but I mean, given the way that the Eagles have this committee set up, I don't know if we're going to see someone else come in. It does seem like they're still shopping the market, and again, you never know what happens when training camp cuts come around.
Right. Yeah.
So something we'll keep our eyes on. The running back room is definitely one that both these teams have on their minds and have question marks still surrounding. So that being said, I think it's time to break this back out. And where are we sitting here, Ricardo?
This is really interesting because while Najee Harris is their bell cow, their number one running back, the Eagles have I guess a bit more depth, but I'm still going to lean towards the Steelers on this one because I trust Najee Harris any day of the week over any of the Eagles running backs. So
I absolutely agree. I think we're going to be talking about Najee Harris as a top 5 running back in the NFL after this season.
Yeah.
And I mean, even about the depth, yes, it's concerning because we don't really have that true second option in game to go to. But even if Najee Harris went down and let's say he was banged up for 2 or 3 games, I would have faith going to Benny Snell for 2 to 3 games. Because I think if you were giving him 15 to 20 rushes a game, he would still. We've seen it every game except for 3 in his career when he's had those extended rushes. He's been able to go for a solid chunk of yards. So I've got faith in him when he's getting the rushes and he's getting the touches. So I'm with you. I think we got to give the Steelers the running back room.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's going to tie things up 4-4 as we go into our last position group next week, which is quarterbacks. So, Ricardo, I don't know if you have any final thoughts before we close things up here, but yes, next week, next Friday, we'll be breaking down the latest stuff from training camp and going over the quarterback. So, any final thoughts here?
That's gonna be wow.
That's gonna be a fun one. That's gonna be a fun one.
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, man. Well, I think we are just about at the end of the show here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. It's always a pleasure to be talking with you guys about the latest on the Steelers and Eagles. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We've been trying to give a lot of updates on the Instagram, so be sure to check that out. And yeah, thank you always for tuning in, and it's been a pleasure talking with you guys. Have a great weekend, and thank you, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.